Hey everyone, and welcome to the show. I think we've got a really powerful one for you today.
Yeah, this is going to be a heavy one.
Yeah, so this one is a deep dive into a reality that I think many of us would struggle even to imagine. And it comes as a special request from our friend Celestial Circle Dance on YouTube.
Always appreciate those recommendations.
Absolutely. And so thank you for this suggestion. We're looking at a book called Some People Need Killing, a memoir of murder in my country.
Yeah, that's going to grab your attention right off the bat.
It really does, and you can find the Amazon link in the description if you want to dive deeper into this yourself. But just a heads up, this is heavy stuff.
Definitely falls into that investigative journalism, nonfiction memoir kind of realm.
Yeah, and if you find this deep dive valuable, as always, please like and subscribe for more content just like this.
So let's set the stage here, right? What we're dealing with in this book, it's not just about the killings themselves. It's about how a whole society grapples with this undercurrent of violence, the permission that's given for it to happen, and the very personal journey of the author who's trying to make sense of it all.
Right, and what's so striking is how language itself is used to both explain and obscure what's really happening.
Absolutely. The words we use, the way we frame these events, has a huge impact on how we perceive them, how we react to them.
So our mission today is to really unpack these core themes from Patricia Evangelista's memoir, focusing on how language shapes our understanding of these killings, the factors that allowed this violence to take root, and the personal impact on the author as she navigates this incredibly difficult landscape.
Right. And we're going to be pulling directly from excerpts of her book to illustrate these points.
So jumping right into it, one of the first things that hits you is the sheer scale and brutality of the killings being documented.
Like, you can't even sugarcoat it. This is raw, unflinching stuff.
And the context here, this is all happening under President Duterte, who very publicly made this promise to target anyone he saw as a threat to the Philippines.
Specifically focusing on individuals suspected of being involved in the drug trade.
And it wasn't just talk. He followed through on those threats.
And that's where it gets really scary when those in power start operating outside the bounds of law and order, when the state itself becomes the perpetrator of violence.
And the methods described, they're horrifyingly diverse. I mean, you've got people abducted, disappearing without a trace, then turning up in canals, blinded, hogtied.
It's like something out of Nightmare.
Yeah, and then you've got others shot right in their own homes, in their bedrooms.
Some even killed right in front of schools.
Right. Like, imagine the trauma inflicted not just on the victims, but on the entire community.
Yeah, the ripple effects of this kind of violence are immense.
The book even singles out this one day, July 9th, as an example, and recounts the deaths of 13 individuals on that day alone, each one a brutal tragedy in its own right.
Just the sheer variety of methods. It's like they were trying to send a message through the brutality itself.
And the details are just gut-wrenching. Some shot while they slept, others strangled and left with cardboard signs accusing them of various crimes.
And that detail about the cardboard signs, it's so deliberate. It's about public humiliation, stripping the victims of dignity, even in death.
And there's this phrase that keeps popping up, killed by unknown hitmen.
Right. It becomes this kind of catch-all explanation, almost a way to distance the killings from any kind of official responsibility.
What's so insidious is that while it might be technically true in some cases, it completely obscures the reality that these victims were overwhelmingly people who were on these so-called drug watch lists.
Exactly. It's a way to create this illusion of randomness, like these were just isolated incidents, but the pattern is undeniable.
Right. These were targeted killings directly in line with Duterte's rhetoric.
And it speaks to this broader issue of accountability, or the lack thereof. When the perpetrators are labeled as unknown, it makes it incredibly difficult to investigate and hold anyone responsible.
It creates this climate of fear and impunity.
And that brings us to the language used to even categorize these deaths, right? The term extrajudicial killings, or EJK, as it quickly became known, it just exploded into common usage.
Yeah, suddenly everyone was using it. People on the street, news anchors, senators, families of the victims, critics of the government.
It really highlights how language can capture and reflect a specific moment in time and a collective understanding of what's happening.
And the fact that this term emerged so organically, it signifies a widespread recognition that something deeply wrong was happening. These deaths were not within the bounds of the legal system.
The very need for that specific terminology signals a breakdown in the rule of law.
And Patricia Evangelista was right there in the thick of it as a field correspondent for Rappler. She was tasked with covering these deaths.
It must have been overwhelming, the sheer volume, the pressure to get the story out there to hold power accountable.
Imagine trying to document this relentless wave of violence where the victims were denied any due process, no charges, no trials.
Yeah, the psychological toll on someone witnessing that day in and day out, it's hard to fathom.
And then there's this whole concept of salvage in the Philippines, which is fascinating and incredibly disturbing at the same time.
Right, it's got these Spanish roots salvaje, meaning wild, which evolved into the Filipino salvaje, meaning savage or cruel.
But here's where it takes this dark turn in the Philippines. Salvage developed this double meaning it means to apprehend and execute without trial.
It's the exact opposite of what it usually means, like to save or rescue something.
Yeah, it's like this Orwellian twist on language where salvaging becomes synonymous with killing.
And it's not just the word itself, right? It's the practice of salvaging the dead into these warnings with cardboard signs. It's about instilling fear and control.
The book also delves into Evangelista's personal experience and the toll that reporting on these killings took on her.
It's a reminder that journalists are not robots. They're human beings who are deeply affected by the stories they cover.
She talks about moving to the Logan Nonfiction Fellowship, seeking refuge. But even there, the paranoia lingered. The vigilance never really went away.
Years of living in that environment of state-sanctioned violence, it changes you.
She even talks about how her initial attempts to write about it resulted in this very detached clinical reportage, just a massive catalog of deaths devoid of her own voice.
It's like she was trying to protect herself by maintaining this distance from the emotional reality of it all.
Yeah, and she talks about this journalistic principle of never the story, how reporters are trained to be observers, not participants, and how she initially hid behind this impersonal third-person perspective.
But then she realizes that that objectivity was in part driven by fear, a failure of nerve, as she calls it.
And this is where we get to this incredibly powerful statement from her. This is a book about the dead and the people who are left behind.
Yeah.
It is also a personal story written in my own voice as a citizen of a nation I cannot recognize as my own. The thousands who died were killed with the permission of my people. I am writing this book because I refuse to offer mine.
Wow, that's a heavy one right there.
It really is. It's this incredibly powerful indictment of the societal forces that allowed this violence to happen. And it marks a turning point in her approach to writing about it.
She's no longer trying to maintain this detached objectivity. She's claiming her stake in this narrative as a citizen, as a witness.
We also learn about her background, born in 1985, the year of the People Power Revolution.
Which is this moment of hope and democratic renewal in the Philippines.
Yeah, but then you have the irony of her surname, Evangelista, meaning bringer of good news, juxtaposed with the grim reality she's documenting.
It speaks to this sense of disillusionment, right? This feeling of a promise betrayed.
And then there are these incredibly raw human moments that she captures, like Love's plea, "Kill me," she said, "not my ma," and the gunman's chilling response, "We are Duterte."
It's like this distillation of the entire conflict into one brief exchange, the desperation of the innocent and the terrifying conviction of the perpetrator.
Right. It cuts through all the political rhetoric and lays bare the human cost of this violence.
And that phrase, "we are Duterte," it's significant. It suggests this identification with power, this belief that they are acting on behalf of the president himself.
It's a claim to authority and impunity.
Which brings us to this complex relationship between democracy and the acceptance of violence that Evangelista grapples with in the book.
She initially believed that a nation founded on democratic principles would inherently reject this kind of brutality.
Which makes sense, right? That's kind of the bedrock of democratic ideals, the rule of law, respect for human rights protection against state-sponsored violence.
But she comes to this realization that her view was perhaps a minority one.
And she starts looking back at Philippine history, the era of martial law under Marcos, the extrajudicial killings of activists, thousands of them.
Right, and even her own family history with her grandfather being imprisoned during that time.
It suggests that this acceptance of violence as a means of control, it has deeper roots in the Philippines than just Duterte's presidency.
And it's so interesting how she contrasts her generation's defining myth, the People Power Revolution in EDSA.
This iconic moment of nonviolent resistance against a dictator.
Right, with the apparent acceptance or at least tolerance of the drug war killings.
It makes you question how societal narratives shift, how a nation that once stood up to tyranny could seemingly embrace this kind of internal violence.
And then there's the way Duterte himself twists language, manipulates it to serve his agenda, like how he tries to draw this distinction between killing and murder.
Right. He argues that murder only applies to the killing of someone who's bound and begging for their life.
It's this bizarre semantic game designed to legitimize other forms of killing, especially those carried out as part of his drug war.
It's a way to evade accountability, both legal and moral.
And he's very explicit about this. He says, I declared war. That's war. Why do they say it's illegitimate? Why is it wrong to say papataya con tao pasabayan ko? Tell me, is there a crime? I will kill people for my country.
It's a chilling statement right there, framing these killings as necessary acts of patriotism.
It's a complete perversion of the idea of justice.
And what's interesting is that the Filipino language Tagalog doesn't have distinct words to differentiate between premeditated killing and accidental death like English does with murder and manslaughter.
Right. Both patayan and paslangan essentially mean to kill.
So there's this linguistic nuance that perhaps unintentionally created space for this kind of manipulation.
And Duterte was very deliberate in his messaging, promising that no police officer would be jailed for carrying out their duty to kill.
It's like they were given a license to kill.
Right, and it created this dangerous idea that those targeted in the drug war had somehow forfeited their basic right to life.
It's dehumanizing rhetoric that paves the way for violence.
The book also delves into the role of vigilante groups and this pervasive sense of impunity.
Which is another really disturbing aspect of this whole situation.
Like the Devout Death Squad, which has long been linked to then Mayor Duterte.
And Duterte himself made these chilling statements about Davao becoming very, very dangerous for criminals and a place where you can die anytime.
It's like he was creating this atmosphere of fear where extrajudicial violence was not only tolerated but encouraged.
And that lack of accountability for the DDS killings set a dangerous precedent for what was to come with the nationwide drug war.
And it wasn't just the DDS. The acronym itself seemed to morph into diehard Duterte supporters,
Blurring the lines even further between state-sanctioned violence and popular support for it.
We also learn about groups like the Confederate Sentinels Group, Tondo Chapter 2, which claimed they were actually paid by the police for every corpse they delivered.
It's just horrifying, the idea of a bounty on human life.
And there's this chilling interview with this self-described vigilante who goes by the name Angel.
And he just matter-of-factly describes their target lists, which included not just drug users and criminals, but even someone accused of having an affair.
And he estimates their kill count at around 20 people in just 7 months.
It's a glimpse into this dark underbelly of the drug war where violence became a commodity.
And the fact that they would go after a target's son if they couldn't find the original person.
It shows you how far removed from any sense of justice or due process this whole thing had become.
Yeah, and then there's this question from Simon. Isn't it strange that it's the families of the dead who have to run?
It highlights this complete inversion of justice where the victims are the ones living in fear.
And to really drive home the human cost of this violence, the book shares glimpses into individual tragedies, like the story of Love and her mother.
Yeah, these individual stories are so important because they remind us that behind the statistics, behind the political rhetoric, there are real people who are suffering.
We also learn about Justin Lopez, a young man with epilepsy who was killed near the railroad tracks.
And his mother, Normie's, incredible fight for justice against the police officer responsible.
Right. She refused to be silenced, even when they tried to bribe her to drop the case.
It's a testament to the strength and resilience of those who have lost loved ones in this conflict.
Then there's the Tarlac shooting incident, where police officer Nuesca killed Sonia and Frank Anthony Gregoria, which was captured on video.
And that video went viral, sparking outrage and protests.
It's a reminder that even in a climate of widespread violence, there are still lines that, when crossed so blatantly, can shock the public conscience.
Right. It showed that people weren't completely numb to the brutality, even though it had become so pervasive.
And we can't forget about the sheer numbers involved, ranging from the government's official figure of over 6,000 deaths to independent estimates exceeding 30,000.
It's staggering, and the government even launched this whole real numbers campaign trying to dispute the higher figures.
It's an attempt to control the narrative, to downplay the extent of the violence.
Which is a tactic often used by regimes accused of human rights abuses.
But amidst all this darkness, there are also these glimmers of hope, like stories of former Duterte supporters who became disillusioned and started speaking out.
People like Jason Kizon and Dondon Chan.
Right, they point to events like the burial of Marcos and the shutdown of ABS-CBN as turning points.
Moments that made them question their support and realize the dangers of Duterte's authoritarian tendencies.
And then there's Joy Tan, a Duterte supporter who faced ostracization and threats for daring to criticize the violence online.
It shows you the risks people take when they challenge the prevailing narrative.
The book concludes by returning to Evangelista's central question, are you going to shoot fellow Filipinos? and her reflection on the promise of the people power revolution versus the reality of the drug war.
It's this powerful juxtaposition, right? The hope of a nation rejecting tyranny versus the descent into state-sponsored violence.
And she ends with this incredibly moving quote, "5 months after I was born 37 years ago, my people said that no man should die because a dictator said he must. My people said it in front of tanks, they said it in front of guns, they knelt, and they sang, and they prayed, and they were brave, and because I was born free."
It's a powerful reminder of the fragility of democracy and the constant need to be vigilant against those who would exploit fear and division for their own gain.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, we've really explored a lot the sheer scale of these killings, the way language is used to both explain and obscure the truth. Patricia Evangelista's incredibly personal journey through all of this, the complex relationship between democracy and the acceptance of violence, and the immense human cost of this conflict.
And for you, the listener, especially Celestial Circle Dance, who suggested this deep dive, we want to leave you with some questions to consider.
How does the language we use to describe violence shape our understanding of it and our willingness to act?
What can we learn from the Philippines' experience about the fragility of democratic institutions and the need to safeguard human rights?
We encourage you to continue this conversation in the comments below or on social media. Share your thoughts, your reactions, your own insights.
It's a topic that demands our attention and our critical engagement.
And if you're interested in exploring Patricia Evangelista's powerful memoir further, you can find the Amazon link in the description below.
And as always, if you found this deep dive valuable and thought-provoking, please like and subscribe for more content just like this.
Thanks for joining us.
Until next time.
Take care.